Synergy loves company.
With activations across our Synergy machine.
We have this coterie of rich franchises, the company now, that people want to engage with.
I came here to try and continue what Walt Disney and his associates set in motion 50 years ago, which is to experiment with every new and innovative kind of entertainment possible.
It's what we hope to do here, to really develop something that, just more than an entertainment enterprise. It's something that contributes many other ways.
Hey, this is Synergy Loves Company, where we explore how Disney connects to everything. I'm Eric Hathorn, and keeping me company today is Adam Dworkin from the Engineering Theme Parks podcast. Adam, I'm happy to have you here. Could you tell us a little bit about your show?
Of course, Eric. Happy to be here. So Engineering Theme Parks is a podcast I do with my wife, Jackie. We started it maybe 6 months ago. We cover a lot of different topics. So some of it is the engineering of rides, how they put them together, how things operate in the parks. Some of it is history. Some of it is just how we're planning our trips with our family. We've got a bit of a unique family situation. So it's a Brady Bunch style thing. I've got 3 kids. She's got 3 kids.
Nice.
Sometimes we take them all. Sometimes it's just us or some combination in between. And we found that people have a lot of questions. So we started doing some recording and exploring of how that works. But we really just talk all things Disney and all things theme parks and, even things that are ancillary to theme parks. So I know we did an episode in the beginning. New York Phil had done a Fantasia concert, right? So we covered that because it touches the theme parks, right? So we just try to explore anything that's in that realm.
Nice.
But it's a lot of fun. So.
Yeah, and I have a lot of fun listening to your show and how you go through those different experiences and talk about, like you said, your family going into it. And because you're the Engineering Theme Parks podcast and we want to talk Disney, I thought it would be great for us today to talk about Arrow Development, who helped Disney engineer some of their theme parks, and talk also about, like our family experiences riding these attractions at the Disney parks. So let's get into it. I'll tell a little bit about Arrow's history to get us started, and then we'll talk about all of these awesome rides and ride systems.
Let's have some fun.
Yeah, definitely. Ed Morgan and Carl Bacon had met before World War II, working together at the Hendy Iron Works in California, in Mountain View, California. But later on, they decided to start their own business after the war, and they built their business from the ground up. I want to mention this nugget. They got the name, actually, Arrow, from when they went in to get a bank loan for their business. One of them was wearing an Arrow tie clip. And when the bankers asked what the name was, they just kind of looked down and said, oh, well, it's Arrow Development. So that was kind of a fun little way that they got it. So they decided to build this machine shop, this manufacturing machine shop, Metalworks, not really knowing what they were going to do with it. They built it by hand from the ground up, and they started making car parts after the war, World War II, to kind of fill the need for the lack of those parts from supplies during World War II. And they made some furnaces for the Navy, and then they started making kiddie park rides for amusement parks, just small amusement parks, and they kind of got successful with some of those. And in 1952, they heard that Disney was going to be building some sort of amusement park, theme park, this Disneyland idea. So they reached out and said, we've got this really cool paddle boat we want you to look at. It's called Lil Bell. Come out and see it. And when Disney came out to tour their work, they walked right past the paddle wheeler. They weren't interested in that, but they were very interested in Arrow's antique cars. And that's what started this relationship between Arrow and Disney. So they actually made 6 different rides for opening day Disneyland. We're going to get into talking about each one, and we're going to take a moment to kind of talk about the little history tidbits about them, and we'll talk about how we enjoy them and experience them too.
I just found it fascinating that, Arrow was like, hey, look, we're going to do these furnaces. We're going to make, car parts for Europe. And by the way, we're going to do some kiddie rides. It's like, I would have loved to be in the room for that conversation for, hey, we've got mufflers and carousels. What do we want to work on today? Like that. But I just think it's interesting that that's the market they were in. Because today, all these companies that design for theme parks really are around to sell to the major parks. They're not doing other things a lot, right? It's, hey, look, we design rides, we design experiences. They were just a machine shop, and they said, hey, look, we have an expertise in building things. Perhaps somebody could use these things. And Disney was right there. I found that whole synergy really just fascinating, right? That they were in the right place at the right time and they knew who to partner with. And that was really interesting to me.
The two coming together, as we're going to see when we talk about these, Arrow and Disney, it really, that relationship, I think, kind of holds together a lot of things about Disneyland's original success that we maybe don't hear so much about in the histories that are told. So the first one let's talk about is kind of just a little one that Arrow had some work on. They didn't build the whole thing, but they really took a lot of time to put this thing together, and that's the King Arthur Carousel. So it originally was a 1922 Denzel carousel that they bought. They had to get some other parts from for the carousel because this one was a menagerie of different animals, and Walt Disney wanted it to be all horses for King Arthur. So they moved this carousel from Toronto, and they had to figure out how to put it together and make it all horses. And I really want to talk about the iconicness of the carousel in Disneyland, in Disney World. I know I'll tell you, I have not been to Disneyland. I've only been to Disney World, but a lot of these rides have, their copies in Disney World. So that's where a lot of my experience for these are going to come from. And then one day I'll go to Disneyland and I'll tell you about how I felt about some of these.
Yeah, we'll forgive you this time, Eric, but you got to get the trip out there. You definitely have to book it.
Yes, we got it planned coming up in a couple of years. I think we're going to try to do it. So we plan far out. I'm not going to lie.
But yeah, that to me, this ride is iconic because you cross over in both parks. You cross through the castle, and the castle occupied, right? It's the weenie, as you'd mentioned. As you're going down Main Street, you're right there. But when you cross through, you're in Fantasyland, and you don't feel like you're in the castle with the castle. It's not the main point of focus anymore, but the carousel is in both parks. It's the first thing you see, the first thing you walk into. There are rides everywhere, but it really does draw your attention. So it had to work. It had to be beautiful. It had to be what Disney was intending it to be. And Arrow, I didn't realize how much rebuilding work they did on this thing. Again, when you get a Disneyland biography and you read about Disneyland, it just sounds, oh yeah, we purchased it, we refurbed it, we dropped it in the park. The things they had to do to it, right? It wasn't even big enough. They put in an extra row. They had to redo almost all of the horses. They were pulling pieces from carousels from all over the country to try to make it work and make it look like one unified piece. But when you do the reading, it's like, oh yeah, we bought this carousel. It was great. WED fixed it up and they dropped it in, and you don't hear about these parts of the process, that the painstaking parts,
right? That
they use carved horses from carousels all over the country to try to fit into this carousel. And another really weird piece of data that I ran into and I thought was cool is apparently it was 71 horses and one mule. I'm not really sure why there's one mule or where they found it, but in the original one, there was just one mule sitting around.
I love that. And I wish there was still a mule on it today. I know it probably isn't still there today, but if they should put a mule on there so that we can find that. Kind of like
the 100th anniversary of the company coming up, right? So they should restore the mule.
Yes.
And Imagineering, if you're listening, we want the mule, so please bring it back. It should be like a special ride element. Yeah, I'm sure you could put that on Genie Plus. I'd pay $10 for that, right? $10 for a ride on the mule.
Just
we could do
ride.
that.
What?
That's right.
I love it. Yes.
Separate lightning
bring back
lane,
the mule.
Eric. That's yeah.
Yes. The one, regular lightning lane, mule lightning lane. Some people be like, what is this? Oh man, yes.
You and I will be standing there. We'll figure it out. It'll be good.
We'll be the only ones. Although people will probably just get in line behind us because people love to wait in lines for when they see a line. They're like, "Oh, this must be something good."
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, we can get into that, but people will do that for fun. Sometimes. I live in New York City, so people will do that for fun sometimes. Like they'll be standing somewhere, they'll be lined up for whatever, and people just get in line behind them, thinking it's a coffee shop or it's a.
It's just a line.
Dude, why are you standing there? We're just standing here. What are you doing? But anyway, back to the carousel. But it is. It's that sense of motion on the carousel, and that they added all sorts of things to it. So elements of Sleeping Beauty, because Sleeping Beauty Castle, but I think everyone who's visiting that park for the first time, I mean, at this point, even in Disney World, I don't walk through the castle anymore, right? You're always going to wherever you're going. But I think almost every first time visitor makes that path through the castle, whether it's at Disneyland or Disney World, and they step into Fantasyland, and it really is. It's the first thing a lot of people see as part of that area.
And
I was shocked how much of Fantasyland Arrow even designed. Yeah, it's Disney magic. So, and they designed a lot of that Disney magic in 55.
Oh yes, I'm glad you brought up all that Fantasyland stuff that they did, because they also had another turning. We got a lot of spinning rides here coming up at the beginning here, and they designed that controversial spinner, the three-way spinner, the Mad Tea Party. Now, one thing I found interesting about, like the Carousel, Mad Tea Party, some of the other spinner rides, is that a lot of times we hear that we'll hear Disney fans ourselves maybe, we'll be like, oh, that's an off-the-shelf ride. They just bought that off the shelf. And that may be true today, but a lot of these rides, Arrow was kind of making the first version of them, in the same way that Disney was making the first version of an amusement park. And it's kind of a testament to these rides that they built, that they've been replicated so many times, and that have become off-the-shelf rides. They had to kind of start somewhere. And even though there were similar rides before at like fairs and carnivals, these are kind of the first of their, of these models of them. So the Mad Tea Party, the controversial spinner ride, I know personally, I won't ride it. I'm afraid to get motion sickness. I've ridden it once. I don't normally get motion sick on things, but this one will make me motion sick. I'll try to steer it. If I was on it, I would try to steer it so it wouldn't spin more. Try to anti-steer it from
Don't
the wheel.
Use the wheel in the middle. Just let it go.
Right? Just like yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, Eric, the only thing I can compare this to is, oh my goodness. I mean, have you guys gotten a chance to ride Guardians of the Galaxy down in Orlando? Have you done that?
So we were there when it was open this past summer, but we didn't take the chance to ride it. I was kind of the only one interested at the time. My son has since gotten into the Guardians of the Galaxy just in those few months since the summer. But my wife and daughter, they do not do any sort of motion sick possibility. And so we heard that it could be a little motion sick spinny. So we decided to steer clear until the next time. But yeah, how about you guys with your experiences?
Yeah, we've done this ride a couple of times. We've probably done it with a variety of the kids 5 or 6 times, and people come off it. And you've seen that, we met on Twitter, so you know the Twitterverse talking about, how motion sick this will make you, and how could they design this. And we've done it 5 or 6 times.
And they move the garbage cans.
To our show, yeah, they move the garbage cans closer to the exit. But if you listen to our show, Jackie has struggled with vertigo, and she's been on it 6 times with no issues, none at all. The teacups, neither one of us will ride. We were doing rock, paper, scissors when we had our 4-year-old there, trying to figure out who was going to take the hit, like and be sick for 20 minutes afterward. It was me.
You don't want to lose that one.
Oh my God. No, I lost. It was bad. It was bad. I had to sit out the next one. But I don't even know. I don't even know how people do it. I look at that ride and I go, oh my goodness, I can't even step foot on that. Like that, not for me.
No, some people love it though. Some people love it. I personally won't get myself on that one.
No, but it's iconic. It's again back to that thought, Eric, of it is an iconic Disney experience, the teacups, right? It doesn't matter what park you're in, they're there. Right? It feels like every Magic Kingdom style park has their version of that teacup ride. And it's just an iconic experience, but it's not one I would choose to repeat on a regular basis. Let's put it that way.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, but the ride design is interesting, right? That idea of, hey, look, it really is a spinner inside a spinner inside a spinner.
Right.
Which is enough to make me sick just even talking about it. But, Arrow was helping to manufacture all of this stuff. So you don't even realize, again, how much they did it. I mean, they pretty much built Fantasyland, and the teacups were a big part of that.
Yeah.
On that opening day feel. And when you look at it, and again, because we've only done it in Disney World, right? The last time I was in Disneyland was over a decade ago, so it's been a little bit.
Gotcha.
But even the look of it is just so different, right? It was more out in the open when they opened it in 55, right? You could see it from all angles. It wasn't under a cover. In Disney World, it feels like it's tucked in a little bit, right? It's not right next to the carousel the way it was in 55 when it opened in Disneyland. So those two things next to each other were probably a huge draw for people coming in.
Right, that energy, that kinetic energy that's spinning right there. Definitely. So, well, we're talking spinners. Let's get into probably my favorite spinner of the three spinning rides that we've been talking about here, and that's Dumbo, the flying elephant, the iconic, everyone shows that on all the Disney commercials have riding Dumbo, to entice us to come. We get to ride Dumbo, the classic character. And it's interesting, this one, the Dumbos were designed by Disney and manufactured by Disney, and only the ride system, just the arms that lifted the Dumbos, were designed by WED, and they kind of had a clash in how the two work together. And I know you were saying some of your research on it, and we had kind of they kind of got themselves into a big mess with what that was like on day one, their first run with it.
Yeah, so it was, well, look, I mean, it's just that idea of, everyone had the right idea, but they didn't talk to each other, right? There was no communication on it. So they designed this great ride system. Disney was like, okay, we'll design the cars because, WED wants it to look X way, right? It wants the Dumbo should look just like Dumbo in the movie, right? Painted just the same way, same size. And they designed these 700-pound Dumbos with realistic Dumbo ears. And they put them on these arms. And Arrow had no idea they were like 4 times the weight they were supposed to be. So when they designed the ride system, it was supposed to be this revolutionary system that they ran by like a NASA engineer with like the hydraulic fluid was supposed to work in this certain space, and it was supposed to evaporate to provide a cooling system, right? So like to almost keep everything lubricated. Well, that's great if your elephants don't weigh 700 pounds and their ears aren't plane wing sized, where they're going to create drag. So that this drag creates heat. The heat creates this issue where instead of evaporating, the hydraulic solution foams. And it foams in like this big brown muck that comes up from under the ride. And that's what the guests were experiencing day one. And in the research, I saw that it was somebody's job on day one after each ride to go and scrape this brown foam off of all the ride systems before they put the next group on. And all I had in my head, Eric, was this idea of like a cappuccino cup run amok. Like every time you start it, like the foam just is bubbling over the side and you can't control it. It just... Honestly, it sounds like the grossest job on day one.
Right.
If I had to pick a job in Disneyland, like to experience, it's not that one.
No,
that is not my choice.
That's got to be the worst. And I like the cappuccino comparison because we could have gone a different way that would have been more gross with this brown foam. So I like the cappuccino one.
Yeah, well, it's a family show, Eric. It's a family show. We'll stick to that.
Thank you for that. So yeah, no, that was a big mess. And one thing I heard was that because of that mess and the way that Arrow handled it and kept someone down there scraping the brown cappuccino foam, as we'll refer to it too, that's what really impressed Walt Disney. It impressed him. He saw their dedication to make it work, to make it right, to fix it after that day, to get through that day. And that's when he kind of became one of Arrow's biggest fans and decided that this was going to be the people he wanted to work with. So that was kind of a neat connection.
Yeah, it is, because it also speaks to how Walt felt about quality and how he felt about working with people and working with companies. And it really underscores the collaboration they're going to have in some of the future rides they built together. and we can get deeper into this idea, but it's something that in the entire industry today is probably lost. That idea of that very strict collaboration and great quality that's being put out all the time. It's a different world today. So to see that Disney felt so strongly about the service that he received from this company,
Right.
that he decided to work with them over and over and over again, is something that I think is very unique to his time and his attitude about running the company.
Definitely.
Because today, you'd fire the company that's producing great big brown cappuccino foam on your ride when it opens, right? You're not even going to work with them anymore. That's
none of that.
out. And he chose to contract again and again and again with them.
Right.
Well, or I get, maybe the modern Disney, thinking about this for a second, maybe the modern Disney calls Starbucks and decides that's a collaboration, right? We're going to rebrand. Just throw a Starbucks logo on each one of the elephants and call it a day.
Dumbo foam. I want my Dumbo with extra foam.
It's a new...
No.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Okay, we'll get back on track, Eric.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm running amok in my head now. I'm seeing like Dumbo-shaped Starbucks cups in my head.
That's maybe after the Christmas cups. Starbucks will start doing the Dumbo cups now. But talking about Walt's relationship with Arrow, he gives this next ride we're going to talk about. He gives them kind of an iconic ride character and kind of lets them have at the whole thing, and that's the Casey Jr. Circus Train. Arrow is integral in making this ride happen, and I know from what I read, Ed Morgan and Carl Bacon were talking a lot about their biggest concern was that whatever they made with this train, they had to make sure it made it up the hill, because in the movie, of course, Casey Jr. makes it up the hill with the I Think I Can scene. So they're like, we can't make a train that doesn't make it up the hill. It has to make it up the hill.
Every time, which is funny because today we're purposely designing coasters that don't make it up hills, right? They actually are designed to come back down as if there's a problem. So
right,
different design elements, just different historical views here. But the Casey Jr. train I thought was a great piece because it was one of those railroad things which just ties into Walt, ties into Disney. They designed it so well. It's one of those like narrow gauge things that
right.
Walt loved, those miniature,
of course,
like trains, and this was probably right up his alley. And believe it or not, the only place this has ever been replicated is over in Paris.
Yeah.
So in all the international parks, they opened one of these in Paris in the early 90s to replicate in their Fantasyland. But it was one of those attractions that is not a spinner. So we finally got our first spinner, a non-spinner rather, from Arrow.
Yes. No.
We didn't have to go in circles. But it was really almost like a tour of Fantasyland, right? So they were able to design it. They really ran with it. And it's still going today. And I think
right.
that's obviously probably been refurbed a couple times. I don't know for sure. But, it's one of those things that's still cherished over at Disneyland, which is very cool. You don't see that a lot.
Yeah. No, it's got a lasting legacy, and that is originally Arrow. It's got Disney IP all over it, of course, but it's definitely an Arrow. So no, that's like you said with trains. We know Walt loved trains, and we can go into trains forever, but that's probably another show for another day. So what I want to get into next, these next two are probably my favorite two. From the original Disneyland batch here, and they're the two dark rides. We love dark rides, right? Disney fans, we love dark rides.
I think we just love saying dark rides, Eric.
Right?
We love enjoying that.
Well, because dark ride's one of those terms that we could be like dark ride, and people are like, "Ooh, what's a dark ride?" And we're like, "I'm glad you asked, because let me tell you." No, like if someone who doesn't know what we're talking about, right? Because then we get to geek out about it,
which is most people. Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah, we have way too much fun with this. But go ahead. So
yeah, no.
Dark rides.
Snow White and Her Adventures. So the scary Snow White stuff. Snow White's Scary Adventures, as we might know it, or the what's the new one, The Enchanted Tales of Snow White. I think is what they call it
Snow
now
White,
at Disneyland, because it's less scary now. But Snow White and Her Adventures was pretty scary and did not have Snow White, because that was part of that time when Disney wanted to put you in the main character's shoes. And so this one, Arrow, of course, did not design, the creepy, old hag peddler woman, evil evil queen kind of thing going on, and they didn't design all the dwarves, but they designed the ride system, the dark ride cars that would drive through the scenery here. But this one, I'll go in. I'll tell my story about Snow White Scary Adventures in Disney World. Of course, I haven't ridden the California version, but I don't like scary things. I famously don't like scary things. I would say if you've listened to me talk about scary things on other podcasts or sometimes on this one, I don't like them. So I did not ride Snow White's Scary Adventures in Walt Disney World until I was in college. I was about college age when I rode it, because then I thought I was ready for it. But it still scared me. And the thing that scared me, by design, I think, is how this ride system, we'll talk about the other famous dark ride system that Arrow helped a little bit with later. But this one, because your car can sometimes be alone in a scene, the way the doors close and open, we got stopped on it, and we were stopped in kind of the dark woods section, and it was like me and my sister, who both don't like scary things, and we're just like, what's happening? Is this good? Keep in mind, I'm in college and I'm terrified. But Snow White's Scary Adventure was terrifying, and some of it I'm going to give to this ride system because it lets you be alone. If you were to, even when you're moving through, you're not always seeing other cars as you go through it. What about your experience with this one?
So I did it slightly before college, Eric, not to put you down, but I was on there a little bit. But to me, this was, when I thought about dark rides, this was the first one I remember experiencing as a kid, was Snow White's Scary Adventures in Disney World, right? It's the very first one I remember going on. You know, Mr. Toad was something that I remembered, but this, when I thought about, and somebody said, "Oh, have you been in Fantasyland? Have you been to Disney World?" This is the ride that came to mind as a kid, right? It's the first time you felt like you were in the story. And I know, that was obviously the intention, but that idea that you always felt like you were going to hit the doors, like you were getting close to the doors. You almost felt like you were going to like always knock into them, but you never quite did. Right? That's the kind, exactly. But it leads to what you were talking about, was sometimes you feel like you're riding by yourself, right? That you're the only one on the ride. Yes. And the ride cars, I thought, were actually really cool because they didn't just face forward, right? If you felt like as you were going on the track, they weren't like Omnimovers like you had today that really the car turned, but they had enough wiggle in them that you always felt like they were pointing you towards something you were supposed to see. It wasn't just straight through or a straight circle. They really moved you through, and each turn that you made highlighted something. And I had never experienced that before, right? Most little carnival rides, even like a little haunted house, it's a straight run, right? You go straight through, that's it. And that I thought was really important in the storytelling, right? Is that they're angling you toward things you're supposed to see or not supposed to see at that time.
And that goes right along with Arrow's design of these. They had a 3-wheel design with 2 in the back and 1 like pivoting wheel in the front so that they could turn tighter and turn faster. And I think that does lend to the intensity of some of those scenes, some of the thinking you're going to hit the doors, some of those kind of different vignettes that you see, spooky or not. It kind of adds to the thrill of it.
Oh, absolutely. And just the design of the ride too, the original ride had if I'm remembering it correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, it kind of had that almost homey design, and each car had the dwarves' name on it. Yes. So because you were supposed to be, again, you were supposed to be Snow White moving through with them, right?
Right.
And that design is also really iconic, right? And they don't use it still today, I don't believe, but to see those developed is really cool. And watching them, there were a couple of photos online, and maybe we can post a couple. I don't know if we can,
for sure,
if you have the ability to do that, Eric.
Of course.
There's a couple of photos that are on some of the blogs of like them designing the cars and, what they looked like, day one. There's even one picture I was looking at that had, it's like the car sitting in California, right? It's clearly in Mountain View, like in somebody's driveway, right? And they're trying to get it put together. I mean,
just out there.
Yeah, it's just out there. So to watch them kind of construct these from scratch, because this was not something that anyone had ever done before. This was new. This was brand new technology that they were trying to go, okay, what can we do to make this ride different to tell the story? And I think that's, again, that great collaboration between Disney and Arrow. Is Arrow had these concepts, these engineering ideas. Disney had these things that he wanted to do. At this point, it is him driving this process. And they were able to bring them together to create an iconic ride that still is open in Disneyland today through a couple of refurbishments.
No, definitely. And staying in this dark ride realm, we talked about how Snow White kind of had that ability to be alone in it. I think one of the things that I loved, because you said Snow White's Scary Adventures was kind of your Fantasyland go-to. Mine was Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. I was one of those people sad when they took it out, but I always kind of Walt Disney World, but I always kind of have that, thought that I know it's in California and I could ride it again. I remember Mr. Toad's Wild Ride being the first ride that I remember going on one of my trips. I know I had been to Disney World before that, but I can remember going on Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. And it uses a similar kind of like electrical ride system. Of course, we get the antique cars that Walt Disney was sold on Arrow originally, and why he hired them was for their antique car designs. And so like their ability to build these antique cars. This is where he wanted to put that before he stretched them out to those other rides too. But this one, I think, in opposition to Snow White and her Scary Adventures or Snow White and Her Adventures, is that you're all together in the same space sometimes for that like hectic feeling where you feel like you're going to hit another car sometimes. And that's, I think, what I loved about it. I didn't like to be alone in the woods. I like to be in a room full of cars, I guess.
You're into social activities, Eric. That's all that means. You want to be with other people. You're experiencing it with them. That's
exactly.
It's healthy. It's healthy. But what I found really cool about this particular ride, and even getting away from the design elements of the ride, because there's a couple we could talk about, but it's a similar ride system, to Snow White. But those antique cars are what originally attracted the attention of Disney. So there's something to that, that connection between Arrow and Disney again, right? That design is Arrow's design, not Disney's design as far as the antique car look. But this was a ride like Snow White was designed to take you through the movie, take you through the plot. You are Snow White. When you went through Mr. Toad, it had almost, if you've ever seen the movie, this ride has almost no connection to the movie at all, other than we're doing crazy stuff and we're going to just get pushed through things. And this is also one of those rides where they managed to design it's not really a near miss. You're supposed to get hit by the train, but right. So the ride car is coming. You're supposed to get hit by the train, and you're supposed to, and I go, no, it's a family show, but you're supposed to end up in hell, right? And
it is what it is.
You're going through hell. It is what it is. And there was something about this ride with, where the last scene is like you and a bunch of red demons that I really just was so wild. Like looking back on it, it should never have been in a theme park. If you tried to build it today, people would be like, dude, what are you doing? Please take this somewhere else.
Why are you ending that way? Yes.
Yeah, like you'd have parent groups all over you.
For sure.
Today, it's a classic, right? And we all still experience it and no one says anything. And it's just really, really funny to me that this ride exists alongside of Snow White with basically the same ride system, the same concepts, the same dark ride feel, but they went two completely different ways with it. And they're two great examples of just, Imagineering, or I guess WED at the time, really just going nuts. And I think just kind of taking it one step further is, you really imagine these guys is in Imagineering or WED or, whatever organization it is, being very cerebral, right? That they're sitting around and they're talking about ride design and they've got pencils behind their ears. And this ride says to me, hey, look, we were having a couple of beers. We thought this would be fun. We drew it up and Walt said, great, right? Yeah. And this paints a whole different picture of me, of these guys getting together, collaborating, and just having a really good time, right? They must have put this thing out and thought this was the most fun they had designing something.
For sure. It's fun to ride because I'm sure it was fun to make, right?
Well, that's it. They must have designed this going, we're never going to get this past Walt. And then he rubber stamped it and they got to build it in a park, right?
Here we go. Right? No, that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I miss this ride at Disney World. I really do. I loved this ride. Not that the Winnie the Pooh ride that replaced it is bad.
No.
Eric, but it's it's just not the same.
Right. It's just a different, it's a totally different ride. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally different feel. You know, this was kind of dark for a dark ride. No pun intended, right? It's a real dark ride.
Yes. It gets dark at the end too. No.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a lot of fun. But these original Disneyland rides, I really enjoyed reading about this, and I know I mentioned this to you previously, is, you know, you always imagine when you read about Disneyland, or you read a biography of Walt, or you read him and he's putting together these rides, you always imagine like him and Bob Gurr standing around with a handsaw, like building stuff in the backyard, like nailing the nails themselves. And to read, you know, through some of this Arrow stuff and go, okay, there was a whole team of guys helping these design projects, right? That these guys coming in, they were animators, they were train enthusiasts, but they weren't full-on ride engineers the way that Arrow was. And they needed Arrow's expertise to get this built and their ideas to make it work. And you don't get a lot of that in the official Disney histories, right? They mention Arrow, right, but they don't dive into it. So to see how much they influenced what we consider classic Disney nowadays is very interesting.
Awesome. Yeah. And that, like, speaking of Bob Gurr, it's like he was one of their liaisons back and forth. He worked a lot with Arrow, and you'll see him pop up in like documentaries about Arrow and some books being interviewed about working with them. But like you said, a lot of times they kind of are Arrow's the footnote on the page about building one of these rides, where WED kind of gets the top billing a lot of times, but Arrow had a lot to do with it. And the relationship actually, you know, continued going forward years to come. After all these experiences of day one, there's a story of Walt Disney asking Arrow, so how much did you make? Famously, he's not knowing the books all the time. So they said, we made nothing. They kind of put everything out into it, and they didn't get a good return from what they put. So Walt made sure to pay them in full, in cash, like make sure that they got paid, because he knew he wanted to work with them going forward. In hindsight, I read that Ed Morgan and Carl Bacon were like, we wish we would have asked for like some stock or a concession at Disneyland instead of getting paid in full. But you know, we missed out on that, but we did get paid for it. So I found that story pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, especially considering, you know, and then I guess we're diving a little bit into Disneyland history, right? All of the financing and stuff that came out of these partnerships and stock arrangements and all of this stuff, they probably could have, had they said, hey, look, we don't need to be paid in cash. We'd rather be paid in a stake. Right. We'd rather get 3% of the gate or something crazy like that. They probably would not have gone through all of the financial issues that they went through, because this company, you know, went through a lot of stuff over the years, and I'm sure we'll get into a little bit of that. But yes, you know, they declared bankruptcy multiple times over the years. So there were always some financing issues and some things. As successful and innovative as they were, they could never quite stay ahead of the curve, which is interesting because you see a company like Disney that was also innovative that always managed to stay ahead of the curve somehow. So there's something in there with the management that even a partnership or a synergy with Disney didn't keep them from needing other companies or eventually having to shut down operations, which is really interesting to me.
Oh, for sure. And so over the next few years, because Disney wanted to make sure that they were supported and that they would continue working with WED, he collaborates on other rides with them. So opening day, there was an Autopia, of course, but in 1957, Arrow builds the Midget Autopia, which is more similar to the rides that they had in some other parks. Because while they're making rides for Disney, they're continuing to make rides for other parks. And so the Midget Autopia, of course, is the smaller version of Autopia younger kids can ride. And they did a similar thing with a motorboat cruise, which kind of functioned on the same kind of track, like the water Autopia, I'll call it. And one thing about these two is they had tracks and rails to kind of keep these little kids on track. Which we see later, Disney decides maybe everyone needs one of those center rails and has Arrow build that center rail under their original Autopia because so many of those cars were breaking. What are your experiences with Autopia, or like in Disney World, Tomorrowland, Speedway, and these kind of car rides?
Well, that center rail is a source of epic frustration, right? So I'm sure it's there for a reason, but I can't tell you how many times I hit that thing with the kids trying to move, like, it's throwing you around. But I thought the really fun part of this story was, and again, I may have some of the details because there are conflicting details online.
Yes.
When you ever have a company like this that's gone out of business, where there's not like an official history, so to speak, there's different things online. And, now I'm sure if you and I were writing an expose for the New York Times, we'd contact all these old people and get the real story. But being as we're just having fun on a podcast, I'm going to just throw some ideas out there. Right. So the original Autopia had no center rail, as you mentioned, right? So it was hard on the cars. It was hard on the people. Apparently, I read somewhere that it was hard on the cast members. They were getting hit, as they were trying to do things on the ride. And that, again, that center rail was something that Disney didn't design. It was at a theme park closer to Arrow, because it's my understanding that Arrow was running some of their own themed amusements at one point. They actually had their own tiny park that they were running. And their system was the center rail system. And one of the engineers was telling a story on one of the videos I watched that they knew Walt was coming to look at something else that they were working on. And they had this system set up, and Walt saw the system there with the center rail and decided that's the system he needed to make this work in Disneyland, is that this center rail system was going to be the way to go. And that's always something that when I read about it, it was like, oh yeah, Disney came up with the center rail. No, Disney didn't come up with the center rail. Disney saw it at Arrow and brought it over and implemented it in their park. And that's lost again, right? So very innovative.
Yeah, I find it funny too in that story. So in like the original, how they got together was, hey, look at this boat we made. And he's like, no, I want the cars. And in this one, they're like, let's have Walt check out this thing. And he's like, no, I want that rail. He just comes and picks something at random. No, different than they were going to show him that day. But he wants it. And so, yeah, the rail, I know personally, the rail made it difficult and frustrating for when I've ridden in the cars with my daughter who wanted to go faster than my wife and son. And we couldn't pass them because they were in front of us, and those situations where in a go-kart situation, you're just kind of drifting past people and flying around if you want to go fast, or you take it slow.
Yeah, that rail is a godsend because my wife says she's not competitive.
Oh,
and she's going to listen to this and get really mad at me. She's competitive. Don't tell her. She would have smoked me a million times. There would have been a million accidents. She would have been in front of me doing, she learned to drive in New York City, enough said. So that's how she operates the Autopia. So that center rail is necessary.
Keeping you safe and on track, right? No.
and married. That's important.
Nice.
I'm looking over my shoulder to see if she's like coming up behind me here with a hatchet or something. It would be like Haunted Mansion style. Yeah.
Yikes. Oh man.
Yikes is right.
I enjoyed all the stories about Autopia, and that rail I think has become an iconic piece of it. Like people know that there's the rail, or if they're riding it and they don't know the rail, they're like, wait a minute, there's a rail on this. It's always like that talking point, that thing that's noticed. And that is an arrow, a mark of Arrow. So that's their signature on it, so they improving on their designs, and things like that. They built another dark ride. And this one, of course, is really cool because it has an upstairs, downstairs going up and down element. So we had our first two in the original batch that was stayed on one level. And now we've got Alice in Wonderland, which has the inside, outside, upstairs, downstairs, 2-level kind of piece that we add with dark rides. I think it brings the dark rides to a whole new level. Me not being a Disneyland person, having not gone there, I haven't gotten to experience this one. So I'm interested to hear what you think about Alice in Wonderland.
Well, the last time I was on Alice in Wonderland, I was a kid, right? I was probably the last time I was on, I was probably like 10. So,
hey.
But I remember doing this ride, and two things stuck out to me on this ride. And I was trying to figure out who designed the ride cars, and I was trying to do some research, but I couldn't get a clean answer on the ride cars. But they're visually, the ride cars are just awesome, right? They look like the Caterpillar, right? You're having a good time, you're sitting inside it. Thought that was great. And the up down is fine, but the inside to outside on this ride is what made it unique for me.
Gotcha.
Right? On almost other than maybe Test Track, right? You think of Test Track as that inside-outside concept in Disney World. But there's almost nothing else that you go on that has an inside-outside component where you're inside for most of the ride, but outside experiencing other elements. Seven Dwarfs Mine Train incorporates a little bit of this, right? Where you're inside a part of it, outside a part of it. But this was the first ride that really even approached that level of, hey, look, we can give you two different experiences. It's a dark ride, but we can take you outside and you can experience show elements. And that's what stuck out to me is, hey, this thing goes outside, right? Especially after, as a kid, you go to Disney World a couple of times. At the time, nothing did that.
Yeah, no, for sure.
This thing that we're outside, we're experiencing the movie. And then it's another ride too. That I'm almost going to put it in the Mr. Toad camp where it's a little crazy.
Gotcha.
Right. It tells the story, but Alice in Wonderland's a crazy movie anyway, right?
Yes.
If you've watched it recently, it's off the wall. It's a trip in itself. So that whole ride is just a little bit insane, and I love that about it too. It's not telling a story in the way that, again, Snow White tells a story. It's just all of these show elements coming together to create a little bit of insanity. And I really enjoyed that.
I love. Now I want to ride it even more. Now I got to see. Note to self: move up that Disneyland trip so we can ride this indoor outdoor experience for sure. No, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I know I've not experienced it since the upgrade, Eric, but I know they upgraded in like 2014 with some digital projections and images. So they're even adding more and more to it. They're actually plussing it as they've gone along rather than getting rid of it. But the ride system, the original Arrow ride system, is still there.
Nice. Yeah, it's that same track through it.
Yeah.
The next big milestone, and I think this is probably the most important thing on the list of what we're going to talk about today for Arrow. It was big for Disney too, but I think the impact of the Matterhorn on Arrow in 1959 kind of changes the trajectory of what this company is going to do. And they essentially under the Disney contract designed the first tubular steel roller coaster in the world, which is still pretty much what we have today. Tubular steel roller coasters, when they're being newly built, we get those tube rails. And so Arrow, I read about this kind of interesting thing where there was kind of a competition about how they could make this ride work in the mountain and make it feel like a bobsled for the Matterhorn. Walt really wanted it to feel like a bobsled, not a roller coaster. And so WED actually came up with, I think at this point, WED really wanted to be the designers. They didn't want Arrow to be involved, so they made their own way to do it. And then Arrow came up with the tubular steel model, and when they kind of showed them both to the Disney execs, WED's failed and Arrow's prevailed, and of course kind of became the industry standard.
I was doing all the reading on this, and the Matterhorn comes up every time you do research on Disneyland, right? It's just iconic. It's right in the middle of the park. And it solved a couple of different problems, right? You had these supports from the Skyliner, which, Walt loved the idea of, the skiing and the mountain resort. So the Skyliner was big to him, but it had these giant metal supports in the ground that he hated.
Yeah.
So it's, okay, I just came back from filming this Third Man on the Mountain documentary.
Yes.
And I'm feeling myself, and I really want a mountain in my park. And only Walt Disney could go to his team and say, I want this mountain, go build it, figure it out. And then, so now we've got this mountain, we've got a new ride, we're covering the supports. It gives the Skyliner almost some purpose in that park, right? It gives it some theming along with, right? So a lot of different things happening there. And you're right, they went, okay, we don't want you to do anything, but we can't figure out how to make this ride work inside the mountain. Because that was the other really big thing too, is that how many roller coasters at that time were housed in something?
Nothing.
Where you had to put it in a structure. Nothing. Right. So, and again, when you read everything about it, you imagine that Disney designed these tubes, right? Everything you read gives you the impression that Imagineering or WED designed this system. And then I was doing the research. I was like, they really had very little to do with it other than, the design elements, the cars, they designed a lot of that stuff, but the tubing was really pioneered by Arrow and patented by Arrow. Arrow owned that concept, and they owned it for the next 40 years. And really the only reason anybody else even started doing it other than Arrow is, they made the mistake at some point of teaching another company how to do it without some sort of non-compete clause. And to me, that was actually researching the company. That was the downfall of the whole company, was them losing this proprietary feel for making coasters. But this was the first one that they were made that worked.
But that's really what you're describing is what happened in this coaster wars of the 80s and 90s, where, like you said, I think it was Vekoma, the company who took the plans from Arrow. And then they were able to make essentially the same coasters, and then everyone was trying to go bigger and faster to try to make it better. That kind of is where Arrow starts to lose out when other people are kind of improving on their designs. But they were a major player in that coaster war, and this is kind of where it starts from, is this Matterhorn, this challenge from Walt Disney to make this bobsled roller coaster fit inside his mountain.
Yeah, and just to bring it back to Bob Gurr, because apparently I'm just going to keep mentioning Bob today. He was instrumental in this one, right? This was his design and track plan. I know you talk about Disneyland, it's like Bob Gurr's right in the conversation, but he was really responsible for this. And the quote I read said it was the hardest project he ever worked on, because they were creating things that hadn't ever existed before. But this was just a really interesting project, and just a bunch of different things happening on this ride, right? Between the tubular steel, the interior of it, all of the wood and steel infrastructure, all the man-made rock, right? to make it look like a mountain. I mean, there's even video out there of people climbing this thing, and they used to allow climbers on it during the day. Yes. Like you could climb it like it was a mountain. But it is a game-changing ride, and it changed the way that we experience roller coasters to this day. And Arrow is completely responsible for that, even though we give Disney a lot of credit for it. That Arrow is really responsible for revolutionizing what we consider the modern roller coaster.
Yeah, and it's not only does it solidify Arrow's kind of next steps for what they become in the future, but it also paved the way for Disney to see that Arrow was important to them, and can really do some awesome things. And it was right around the year after the Matterhorn came online that that Disney decides to invest in Arrow. Walt always wanted to make sure that they're okay, just like making sure they got paid for their Disneyland work. And he buys Disney buys a third of Arrow, so they become a third part owner. I heard somewhere that it was in an attempt to stop C.V. Wood, who was, of course, trying to smear Disney's name and say that he was the main designer of Disneyland and try to make his own amusement parks, which he did with Freedom Land out in New York, in your neck of the woods. So I heard that angle too, but I really think too that Disney wanted to make sure that he kept Arrow in good graces after all these ride systems that they were really integral in creating.
You touched on something really interesting with the Disney purchase of the third stake in Arrow, and something, I think it was one of the documentaries, because there's a couple online that were a great watch on Arrow, but there was one that I thought really spoke to the partnership and the synergy between the two companies, and said something about Walt that I didn't know. And again, I've read a million Disney biographies. Right. This one never came up, right? That in addition to buying the third stake in the company, he had learned that Arrow had lost money on every one of the projects that they had done for Disney, right? They didn't break even. They didn't make money. They literally lost revenue working for Disney. And that Walt had cut them a check to break them even, in addition to buying the third stake.
Nice.
Right? So because not only did he want to make sure they were here, but he wanted to make sure that they were paid for the work that they did, that they had actually been rewarded for what happened. And to me, that said something about, Disney as a company at that time, Walt Disney, the man at that time,
yes,
for all the crazy negative, things you hear about him sometimes. And that's just a piece of the story that, as we're talking about all the rides, that stuff is forgotten, right? That it's not just a business decision to buy the ride company that's helping you. He felt strongly that it was his responsibility to take care of them because they had taken care of him. And it's, again, a kind of corporate synergy you don't see today, right?
Oh, for sure.
Today, Disney would have just bought the whole company, broken it up, and put their own people in place and called it a day for the patents, right? So, and not to get negative, but that was the corporate thinking. And instead, they embark on this partnership that creates stuff like the flying saucers, which we can get into. But I just wanted to share that story because that in all of the research really impacted my view of what was going on at that time in the company.
No, definitely. I appreciate you bringing that up too, because I don't think you're being negative with Disney. I think that's just kind of become what business is today. And we don't like, that's the business world and how a lot of corporations work. And it's just a testament how Disney was, it was a different time, and Disney was doing things a little different back then. But yeah, flying saucers. This ride system is so cool.
This is so cool.
And Carl Bacon is like, if you find the patents, he designed the ride system. He would ride around it when he was testing it on a piece of plywood. Because of course, Disney, Bob Gurr designed the cars for these. We talk about Gurr, and we're talking about Bob Gurr a lot today in Arrow. But this idea of, instead of having the hovercrafts, as I'll call them, have the hover mechanisms inside, it's the floor that is pressurized that will raise them up, kind of like an air hockey table. I think it's the coolest thing.
Well, and if you look at the old pictures, that's all I'm thinking is, oh wow, where's my paddle? I'm going to knock some people around on this ride.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly like I'm doing that with my hand as I'm looking at it. This is like a ride system that only somebody in 1950 or 60 could come up with. It screams, I watch Buck Rogers TV shows, right?
Yes, for sure.
Just so interesting. But the part of this ride system that I thought was really interesting was that these saucers themselves have literally no moving parts.
Right.
None. There's no wheels. There's nothing on those saucers that move other than the air is lifting you and allowing you to float, which means you can go remarkably fast because there's no friction that's existing between any moving part and the floor. Right. So it's really, it's something I wish I could have experienced. Obviously, not something we can go relive.
Right.
But if you have a chance to see the pictures online, these ride vehicles almost look like, do you remember oh my God, somebody's going to be listening to this podcast going, oh, how could the things, the vision things where you put the thing in, you push it, and it would give you different pictures.
A Viewmaster.
A Viewmaster, thank you. Yeah, somebody is pounding their steering wheel right now going, my God, it's a Viewmaster. Yes, these ride cars look like a Viewmaster, right? It's almost like if you designed a Viewmaster you could sit in, that's what the flying saucers look like.
Yes. Yes. No, and that's, so I do, so when we talk about not being able to ride the flying saucers, I know that Disney California Adventure did have the Cars Land. In Cars Land, they had the Luigi's Flying Tires, which was kind of a take on this. It wasn't the exact same kind of concept, but it was a similar version. And of course, it's not there now. So if we go back to Disney, I think it closed, right?
I think Luigi's is still open, but I think the ride system is slightly different. I could be wrong about that. Again, I'm not. Yes, but the flying saucers, yes, are closed. They are gone for many, many years now. I think they closed.
Right, the flying saucers.
Back in '66, I think they were only there for a little bit.
And it was kind of seen as a failure in that sense, but it's still very cool.
Well, it was really interesting because as rides go, right, it probably had historically the most efficient loading system. It loaded people well. It was spaced well. It had no moving parts. Maintenance was not going to be as much of an issue, and yet it just wasn't a hit.
Right.
It was not great, and it only lasted 5 years pretty much.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's also a sign of the times in the 60s there, that the space race, space flight, science fiction, these things were all, I don't want to say that they were new, but they were in their heyday. So a flying saucer ride probably made a ton of sense, but probably was not getting enough people on it, enough people through it. And when you had all of these other attractions that opened in 67, where you're looking at things like Adventures Through Inner Space, which I'm sure we'll talk about, the original People Mover, the Carousel of Progress, like all of this stuff opening in 67 after, when you saw all that stuff on the table and they're designing it for New Tomorrowland, I'm sure the flying saucers took up a lot of real estate. It's a big space. We want to put all this other stuff in. I'm sure they were going, okay, this is great, but it's not going to be an e-ticket attraction moving forward. we can get all this other really cool, more technological stuff in there. Because when this ride opened, it was, I believe, an e-ticket attraction.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they said, okay, this is not a current e-ticket. Let's see what we can do other than this.
Use the space for something else.
But very, very interesting system.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah. I think it falls into that almost in, speaking of Disneyland, right, in this way, all of that extra space they had from, when they were doing, mule rides and train, right, all that stuff that they could put attractions in, they closed it down because it, A, dangerous, and B, waste of space, right? We can be more efficient in this small area. So, but this is one of the rides that we talked about that you can't experience anywhere else. There's nothing I could find that was an equivalent to this ride. And it is something that I would have loved to have been on in person. It looks so interesting.
Definitely. That's how I feel about it too. All right, we have to actually go to your neck of the woods right now, out to the New York World's Fair.
Let's do it.
And we have to talk about boats. And we have to talk about specifically It's a Small World at the World's Fair. And Arrow had some previous experience making flume rides. They were one of the first companies to make flume rides. They didn't build one for Disney, but they had been building them for other parks.
Eric, what didn't they do? Let's be honest.
Right? They did it all. They did it all, and they had a ball while they did
it all. Like every time we come up with a ride that we think is really iconic, it's like, oh yeah, Arrow was doing some of that already, and I'm like, well, okay, Arrow did it.
Exactly. So they took their water knowledge and they started to apply it to Disney's fun little boat ride that he wanted to make with It's a Small World. So they had nothing to do with Mary Blair's art and the songs that the Sherman Brothers wrote. They were all about making sure that the boats got through the buildings. And I gotta say, I love a good Disney boat ride. And we got Arrow to thank for that.
And there's so many of them. I mean, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit, but moving through all of the different boat rides that Disney has done, and I don't know if Arrow is responsible for that really authentic Disney water ride smell. I don't know if they designed that piece of it, because no matter where you are in the world, every Disney water ride smells the same. I don't know what that's all about.
Yes.
But that sounds like another show also, is what the heck's with the water on Disney rides.
Nice.
But I love the history of It's a Small World. My wife loves the aesthetic. Jackie loves the It's a Small World aesthetic, to the point that, that iconic clock, face.
Yes.
Like the almost smiling clock face in Disneyland is, I had to get her a 3D printed clock of that because she loved it so much. She wanted it somewhere in the house.
That's so cool.
So, but the entire history of this ride, from, it was like last minute. They weren't sure they were going to do it. It wasn't one of the things they were working on. Walt decided that he had to have it, because who told Pepsi that we weren't going to do this? I didn't say that, right? Which is just a very Walt thing to do. Comes right into the same idea of, hey, I want a mountain, right? Oh yeah, we're working on 5 other things, but build this boat ride. Yeah, make it happen. I'm going to go home and play with my trains, but make this happen. But I loved how many things had to come together for this ride to happen. And part of it is the ability of them to create a flume ride that was able to be broken down, shipped, and reassembled in short order and keep it working. Because at the 64 World's Fair, there was no time for maintenance or breakdown. It was, hey, look, this thing has to run. And it has to go.
No, I was just going to say, they have it, the way that they used the jets and the guide rails to kind of keep it on track, but make you feel like it was like seamless and simple, like the complexity that goes into trying to, when I was reading about how they did it, I'm not going to lie, my eyes started to glaze over, but they had different basins and different depths and different parts to slow you down and speed you up, and jets and different, propellers and propulsion systems. And I was like, it just feels like I'm cruising down a little river. It's like, it's a lovely ride. And it's like, there's so much to make it work that way.
And it's something that is, again, going back to the idea of they had their hand in something truly iconic that we see as a Disney iconic moment that's really built by Arrow.
Right.
that without them, this probably doesn't work. But the 64 World's Fair was really, and kind of going into my neck of the woods, because it is right here.
Yeah.
The 64 World's Fair was something that was very special here with everything that was going on. But it also led to a lot of the iconic Disney technologies that we think about today, whether it's flume rides, animatronics, the artwork, the aesthetic of Mary Blair, right? Coming into the parks and being a part of what we experience, whether it's on It's a Small World or in the Contemporary Resort or through many of her murals, right? This was the start of a lot of these things. It's just completely iconic. But the idea that we could come with the Sherman Brothers, who were iconic Disney composers writing the songs, Mary Blair's artwork, the outside and the exterior designed by Raleigh Crump, right, who is just an iconic, WED designer over the years. And then the fact that it was really all done for UNICEF, which is what brought this whole thing together, right? Something that was going to be recognized worldwide. But these patents still exist today. These were utilized on a ton of different attractions, and Disney is still using this same technology. The propulsion system and the design of the boats has not changed.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure it's
boats.
been implemented in many other areas. Those boats.
Yeah, those boats. I love when you see those boats. It's like, this is going to be good. Whether you're on the Grand Fiesta Tour or the next one that Arrow had to improve on. They had to improve on their Small World boats to make the Pirates of the Caribbean boats, and Walt wanted it to be thrilling, so they had to add some more. It's kind of the same system, but they had a drop in there now, and they had some different speeds and guide rail kind of things that they needed to work with. And that's another one of those like super iconic things that we think of. I think every time we go to Disney, we have to ride Pirates.
Yeah, look between Pirates and Haunted Mansion, right? Both of those things, you just have to ride them. Jackie and I were recently in the Magic Kingdom for literally 4 hours. We had 4 hours on a getaway day, right? That we were flying back to New York. We were catching a 1:00 flight, and the park opened at 8:30, and we went, okay, we're going to get over there and we're going to ride a couple of things. And one of those things was the Haunted Mansion, because we couldn't see going into the park and not riding it. So it's just, both of these things are completely iconic. I mean, obviously the Haunted Mansion and Adventures Through Inner Space, you're getting into more of that Omnimover feel, like the
right
classic, I won't say classic Omnimover, but you know what I mean. At the time it was not classic, it was innovative. But, as they were going into developing these things, a car that could be turned to in multiple directions to really point you at something that they wanted you to look at. I mean, that takes you all the way up to a ride like Guardians of the Galaxy that is really an Omnimover roller coaster, which is a kind of combination of all of the different things that Arrow has given to Disney over the years put into this one ride experience.
Right. Yeah. And so talking about the Omnimover and those, Arrow is the ride system manufacturer. And one thing I think is like this is like the pinnacle of Disney rides. For me, I love the boats. I love the Omnimovers. But we also see at this time, WED not giving Arrow full range on some of these things, not giving them the full, hey, do this. It's just kind of like, this is the mock-up for this Omnimover that we have. You guys build it. I think we start seeing that transition. And I don't know if it's because Walt's not around anymore when these start coming online. And maybe WED didn't have the same feeling about Arrow. But we do get, they're definitely a part of these. But we see, especially with the Omnimover, WED, when I would look at it, WED was in the writings and the patents and things, WED was very sure to make sure that the Omnimover was in their designers' names and their patents, and that Arrow just built it.
Yeah, and I think you're getting, what you're really getting is, I think it's a change in the corporate culture. I don't know how much it had to do with Walt passing away. Maybe there was an element to that. But I think as you move from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s, you're seeing a shift in the way corporations exist in America. And I know that's probably even a much deeper conversation. We could probably do a whole show just on the corporations and their structure in America and how that affected Disney. And
we so should.
Oh, we should. That would be so much fun. Right? But corporations in the 40s and 50s were almost viewed as an extension of the American public, right? You were here to serve a need that the public had. By the time you hit the 60s, that was kind of going away. By the time you hit the 70s and especially the 80s, it was about the profitability of a company. It was about keeping things in-house. It was about how, conglomerates are the wave of the future, right? How can we keep more under one roof? How can we control the processing, control everything that's going on? I don't think Walt ever would have thought to do it that way.
No.
Right? So, but in the same way that things evolve, I mean, you almost look like, and Eric, you can stop me if I'm completely nerding out and getting way off track. But
no, go for it.
Even when he was designing cartoons, like when he was designing his cartoons in the 20s and the 30s, the idea of an animation shop was not what it became under him, right? So there was an evolution to that, right? He would draw, he would do some of that work, but finishing work was done somewhere else. The distributors would hand it out. They were sold to other distributors. They were sold to movie houses. It only took a couple of really bad experiences before Walt said, hey, look, we want to distribute these ourselves. We want to handle this stuff in-house. We want to do all the finished work here. We want to own our products. We don't want to license it to you. So I think what you're seeing is the same concept almost, just 30, 40 years down the line is, hey, look, why are we licensing this out? Why don't we own it here? But we don't want to necessarily pay to run a machine shop here that's built, fabricating entire rides. That's not what we do.
No, that's a good point, that it was kind of that natural progression.
Yeah, at least, and again, I'm sure there's some historian somewhere who would tell me, hey, Adam, you're way off base. What the heck are you talking about? But that's that's just my perception.
We're just having
from
fun.
Seeing all this
right?
stuff happen through the years.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah, we're just having fun. So, but the idea of that Omnimover was just game-changing in so many respects. And so many, it's not just at Disney. Like Disney owns the idea, but they don't own the ride system. So, you had variations of it in all sorts of famous rides that, we wish we still had, right? Horizons used it. Buzz Lightyear uses the same ride. I think Buzz Lightyear is the only ride when you can actually control the Omnimover yourself, right? Where you're spinning it instead of the ride spinning it. Right? Journey into Imagination, the original, right? They would take you through those large rooms, large moving platforms, right? The platforms would spin with the cars on it, but the cars would turn to make sure you were seeing the right part of the spinning platform. So a bunch of different ways that those ride vehicles have been used over and over and over again, whether it's traveling sideways or spinning you, and they're used all over the world. I mean, I know two of the ones that I think of immediately are, because I know they're all over Europe, but I've never experienced those rides, so I won't speak to them. But if you've ever been to Hershey Park, which is close here to the New York area, right? It's in Pennsylvania, Hershey, Pennsylvania.
I have not, unfortunately, but it looks cool.
It is very cool. You should go. It's the only place in the world you can get your picture taken with a giant Reese's peanut butter cup in a costume, which the best. It's just fun. But they have a chocolate tour, right, where you tour the fake factory. That's in an Omnimover, right? So it's very Disney-esque.
Nice.
There's some singing cows, which is also very Disney-esque. So they clearly got the feel.
Yeah.
And then if you have been, because you haven't been out to the West Coast yet, if you go out to Universal Studios Hollywood, which, believe it or not, I've been to more recently than Disneyland, that's a whole different show as well. But they have a Secret Life of Pets attraction out there. That is like a next generation Omnimover that is very cool.
Nice. No, those put those on my list right here. Write them down. No, definitely
should get out there. Because we can get into Universal Studios Hollywood is like it's a very different theme park experience. If you're used to even Disneyland or Disney World or Universal in Orlando, it's got a very different feel. But again, something else we could get into. But if you haven't gone, go. It's worth your time.
Definitely.
But between the Haunted Mansion stuff, we're incorporating it into dark rides. I would say that of all the ride systems we've talked about, maybe not industry wide, but of all the systems we've talked about, the Omnimover in a theme park, not a coaster park, but just a normal theme park, that concept, that idea, that build that they did for the Haunted Mansion and for Adventures Through Inner Space has had more influence on future attractions than anything else I can think of in the industry. And again, thank you, Arrow.
Right? And even if they weren't necessarily the ones who designed it 100%, you gotta figure that the work they've done with WED over the years highly influenced all those things and continued to influence decisions at WED and Walt Disney Imagineering for years to come.
Yeah, it's just been such a part of what they've done for so long that you can't imagine a Disney park without an Omnimover in it. So the fact that they had even a small hand in that, even if it was just the construction, is an amazing thing. It really is. And just to give a shout out, not that they're listening because they're not with us, but Roger Brogy and Burt Brundage developed that original system for WED, and that was around 68. And of course, who else would have named the Omnimover other than Bob Gurr? Because apparently he's the theme of the show today. It's all Bob all the time.
He's the secret theme.
He seems to be the secret theme in Disney. Like Bob's name comes up a lot. Anytime you're doing Disney research, Bob touched something.
And we love him for it.
Yeah, we do. Oh my God, we love him for it. But and then you look at you can tell me if I'm jumping the gun, Eric. But
no, do it.
Looking at kind of a company, just to talk about Arrow for a second and maybe even separate them from Disney. They're a company that influenced so much that never quite got their handle on the business side of what they did. So they were always making what seems like poor business decisions. I mean, this is a company that, in effect, with everything they did and the companies they worked with, because it's not just Disney. They did work for, Six Flags. They did work for many regional parks. They were running their own stuff. This should be a company that's huge. We should know them today. And everything I read about them, it was just snafu after bad decision, after mismanagement, again and again and again, to the point that they don't exist today. And that's a shame, because a company that was responsible for this level of innovation should exist. And they don't. And it's almost sad, because you're not going to be able to celebrate the history of this company except in areas like this as a legacy product or idea, so to speak. No one's going to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Arrow designs or Arrow systems. And they were so revolutionary. Even looking at some of their coaster work for Magic Mountain or some of the other parks that they designed for, these coasters are still there today. I mean, I remember growing up, again, in the New York area, we have Six Flags Great Adventure here. Okay. They designed the American Scream Machine, right? And the Scream Machine was the iconic roller coaster in this part of the country, right? If you didn't go on the Scream Machine when it came out, you hadn't lived yet.
Right.
And that was all Arrow, right? They designed that whole system. So they were continuously innovating into the 90s, and really, as the landscape got different, they couldn't keep up. They were really not managed in what seems like a great way. But, I think their mark on Disney, on the theme park industry in general, is really indelible. Like if you're looking into coasters and theme parks, you have to talk about Arrow.
For sure, definitely. That's when you talked about American Scream Machine. It made me think of our Six Flags Great America in Gurnee, Illinois. I'm in the Chicago area. We had Demon, which was called Turn of the Century when it started, and that was one of theirs. One of the first in our area, at least, to have that corkscrew that they developed later. And so many little things like that we feel when we ride those rides, like they're attributed to Arrow, and we don't always think about it. They don't always get the credit. But they've affected us all of us theme park fans.
Yeah, even looking at things like inverted coasters, or coasters that hang, where you're hanging from the top of the track, right, instead of being on the track, right? These are all things that they pioneered. That they really came up with these concepts, and we just live them today. But we never think about Arrow. But without Arrow, I don't think Disneyland would have worked the same way. I don't think Disney would be effective in the way it is today. Without their technical expertise, we wouldn't have the rides that we have today. It would be a completely different landscape. So Disney really owes a lot to the legacy of Arrow.
I think that's a great place to leave it there. Adam, it's been awesome to talk to you about Arrow and Disney. And I want to make sure everyone knows where they can find Engineering Theme Parks, your podcast, and tell us a little about where we can find you online too.
You can find us at engineeringthemeparks.com. You can see us on Twitter at ETP Pod. My wife runs a fantastic Instagram page over at Engineering Theme Parks over on Instagram. Really, that's where we do most of our work. As far as personally, I don't post personally. So if you want to reach me through one of those sources. You can always, if you have a question or you want to ask a question or you're interested in correcting me on something, which happens a lot, you can email info@engineeringthemeparks.com and say, hey, Adam, you got this wrong. What are you talking about? I'm happy to respond and interact. But those are the main places you can get us. And I think I told you before the show started, Eric, you know, we've had a lot of shifting things here at the house. So a lot of moves, a lot of some family things going on, but we have some episodes in the can. We're recording regularly again. So please do look out for us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. And, you know, I'm sure everyone says this at the end of a show. If you like the show, if you're enjoying it, don't keep us a secret. Please do let us out there. Give us a rating.
Yes.
Certainly, you know, Eric's doing some wonderful stuff as well. So if you're on rating me, rate him too. Have some fun. We love those 5-star ratings. It's what keeps us going. But really just a pleasure to get out in the community and do this work. And hopefully people are enjoying it.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you so much too for bringing that up. Yeah. Of course, tell your friends about Engineering Theme Parks, Synergy Loves Company. Let them know that we're out there so that, you know, we get more people, more ears on us. And of course, I had such fun time today. At some point in the future, we got to get together and do this again on maybe one of those other topics we listed, because I think we could talk for hours. So we'll have to do this again.
Absolutely.
sometime.
And Eric, you know, we'll come up with a date for you to come on with Jackie and I. We'll have some fun on our show as well.
Awesome sauce. That'll be great. I can't wait.
Sounds perfect.
You can find me on Twitter at Eric H. Synergy. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Synergy Loves Company. Visit synergylovescompany.com, and there you could find out more about a YouTube channel for little clips of this interview, or some of my solo shows are on there. And then, of course, the podcast will be on synergylovescompany.com. Like we said earlier, tell a friend. If you like this, if you know someone who is interested in theme parks, and wants to hear more about Aero, tell them about this show, tell them about Engineering Theme Parks, tell them about all of it, so that they could find that information. Tell them about the shows in general. And thank you so much for listening. I can't wait to meet up with you next time. Have a good one.